Gibraltar was known to the ancients as Mon Calpe, one of the pillars of Hercules. Ptolemy first determined its latitude, and the correctness of his calculation is corroborated by the observations of the present day. The conspicuous form and isolated position of this rocky promontory, which stands like nature's monument with all its rugged steeps at the entrance to the Mediterranean Sea, made its name familiar to ancient navigators, and we find the rock referred to and described by both Greek and Roman writers. Pomponius Mela, who having been born at Tangier, had opportunities of becoming acquainted with remarkable places in the vicinity, gives a more than superficial account of the wonders of the mountain, its caves and precipices. Strabo, too, has sketched its curious form and structure. Ptolemy refers to it as the column of the inner sea. None of these writers mention that Calpe was occupied by any town or settlement during their times. And little doubt exists that the rock was not inhabited until the Mohammedan invasion. It was not until then that Gibraltar first occupied a place in the history of the world. On this rock, the first footsteps of the great Muslim host were planted. It was from here that streamed the mighty armies which crushed a powerful monarchy and established an infidel dynasty in Spain for upwards of 800 years. And it was from here, when the might of Christian arms had again revived, that the last remnant of a once glorious empire took flight from the shores of Barbary. At the beginning of the 8th century, the western provinces of Africa, which had succumbed to the successful arms of the Saracens, were ruled over by a celebrated chief, the Wali ibn Nosair, with the exception of Ceuta, which still remained attached to Spain under the government of Count Ilian, a Christian knight. All the ports along the northern coast were in the hands of the Wali, and a garrison of 10,000 men, Arabs and Egyptians, commanded by Tariq ibn Sayyad el-Nefisi, was maintained at Tangier. Spain, then under the sway of the Visigoths, was ruled over by Roderick, who, under the deposition of Witiza, had usurped the crown. The history of the invasion of Spain by the Saracens and the subsequent catastrophes to the Christians, resulting in the overthrow of the Gothic dynasty and the establishment of the Moorish dominion, is wrapped in the mist of fable. To accept as true the romantic narratives of the Arabians or to trust to the traditions of the Christians would be equally fallacious. Repudiating as fabulous the tale of the violation of Count Ilian's daughter, called Julian in the Spanish histories. A traditional tale is told that Roderick, having gained possession of Count Iliao's daughter by violence, the latter, goaded by revenge, planned the invasion of Spain and the destruction of the Visigothic throne. Repudiating as fabulous a tale of the violation of Count Ilian's daughter, we may conclude that the cupidity and restless ambition of the chieftain Musa Ion Nosair, encouraged by discontented traders who desired the fall of Roderick, were the causes which led to the expedition that overran Spain and eventually crushed one of the most powerful monarchies of the world. That Ilian was a traitor to his country. Ilian was a deputy from the court of Toledo and was entrusted with the government of Ceuta, from where he had every opportunity of conspiring with the Moors. Gallegos, Volume 1, page 539. Some historians make him a Goth and relative of Roderick, others a Greek, and some an independent prince. That Ilian was a traitor to his country and aided Musa in the accomplishment of his scheme admits of little doubt. The count, who is referred to in every narrative of the Mohammedan conquest, whether of Arabian or European origin, is said to have been a descendant of the Roman people who at one time possessed most of the fortified towns and ports on the northern coasts of Africa. Aware of the inclinations of Musa and his ambition to conquer the fertile coasts that lay beyond the narrow sea, Ilian sought an interview with the Wali and represented in rapturous strains the glories and riches of the fruitful land, the few miles that spanned the intervening water and the facility for a successful invasion. To use the words of the Arabian historian Al-Makari, he described Andalus, Spain, as an extensive kingdom filled with treasures of all kinds whose inhabitants would make handsome slaves, a country abounding in springs, gardens, rivers, and a land yielding every description of fruits and plants. Musa, secretly captivated by these allurements, was too prudent to acquiesce until he had more certain proofs of the sincerity of Ilian's intentions and the reality of his descriptions. With the object, therefore, of testing his honesty, he proposed that the Count should first make an incursion into the opposite country at the head of his own troops. To this, Ilian willingly assented, and collecting a few men, he crossed the straits in 2 vessels and landed at Jessura al-Qadra, Algeciras, from whence, after ravaging the coasts, he returned laden with spoil. On the following day, immediately the success of this expedition was made known, Musa wrote to the Caliph, entreating his permission to undertake the invasion of Andalus. The Caliph, however, was not yet convinced of the prudence of the undertaking and replied to Musa in the following words: "Let the country be first explored by light troops to overrun it, and bring the news of what it contains. Be prudent and do not allow the Muslims to be lost in an ocean of dangers and horrors." To which Musa answered, "It is not an ocean, but only a narrow channel whose shores are everywhere distinct to the eye." "Never mind," replied the Caliph. "Even if it be so, let the country be first explored." In order to carry out the instructions of the Caliph Al-Walid, Musa prepared an expedition of 400 foot and 100 horse under command of Tarif Abu Sarah, a freedman and a Berber. The number of men composing this expedition is differently stated by the various chroniclers, some writing 500 as above and others 1,000 and even more. In September AD 710, Tarif set sail with his followers and landed on the opposite coast at a spot which has ever since borne his name, Tarifa. From thence he ravaged the country, pillaging and murdering the inhabitants. Having collected a mass of spoil, including numerous women, he returned to Africa and reported his success to Musa. The emir, no longer doubtful of the riches to be obtained from Andalus and perceiving that success had attended both the expeditions, again wrote to the Caliph for permission to attempt the conquest of the territory. This time the Caliph did not withhold his consent, and preparations were immediately commenced for the invasion. A fleet was collected at Ceuta. Some say Tangier, but this is obviously an error. For the transport of the army, Count Ilian provided many of the vessels. The command of the expedition was entrusted to Tariq ibn Sayyad, a native of Persia, and a freedman of Musa ibn Nusayr. The army consisted of 7,000 men, principally Berbers and slaves, very few being genuine Arabs. Everything being prepared, the expedition crossed the straits from Ceuta and landed April 30th, 711 at the foot of a mountain opposite to Ceuta, which thenceforward received the name of Gebal Tariq, or the Mountain of Tariq. In Gayangos' translation of the narrative of Al-Makari, there is the following description of Gibraltar. Another of the districts which acknowledges the jurisdiction of Seville is that of Jebel Tariq, which stands as a lasting testimonial of the conquest of Andalus, Spain, by the Muslims. This monument was called after Tariq, freedman of Musa ibn Nusayr, who was the first Muslim who landed upon it. It is also called Gebalu Ab Fatah, the mountain of the entrance or victory. The sea surrounds the mountain of Gibraltar on almost every side. So as to make it look like a watchtower created in the midst of the sea and facing Algeciras. A certain Grenadian poet alludes to Gibraltar in the following distich. The mountain of Tariq is like a beacon spreading its rays over the seas and rising far above the neighboring mountains. One would say that its face almost reaches the sky and that its eyes are watching the stars in the celestial tracks. And this is by no means exaggerated, for when the travelers approach it coming from Ceuta, they see it at a distance shining as bright as a lamp. I sailed once, says Abu Hassan ibn Musa ibn said, with my father from Ceuta to Gibraltar, and had an opportunity of verifying the truth of this assertion. When we came near the coast, my father told me to look in the direction of Gibraltar. I did so and saw the whole mountain shining as if it were on fire. In an Arabic MS entitled The Book of Sufficiency on the History of the Caliphs, translated by Gayangos, there occurs the following allusion to the landing of Tariq. Before Tariq left Africa, a large number of volunteers flocked under his banners. Before Tariq left Africa, a large number of volunteers flocked under his banners. He first went to Ceuta, and having embarked in vessels, he cast anchor close to a mountain which received his name and was ever since called Gebal Tariq. It is certain that the first incursion into Spain was made by Ilian, who landed at Algeciras for a few hours, the second by Tarif, who landed at the present Tarifa, the third and final one by the expedition under Tariq, who disembarked at Gibraltar. Some authors assert that Tariq did not land at Gibraltar, but at Algeciras. Quoting in support of their argument passages from Arabian writers in which an expedition is described as disembarking on Algeciras. These writers could not have been aware that Algeciras, translated, signifies an island or piece of land surrounded on three sides by water, and that the term is constantly applied to the whole of Spain, and is even used when describing Tarifa. The modern Algeciras is always referred to by the Arabian chroniclers as Jazeera al-Qadra, the Green Island. No doubt exists at Gibraltar. Derives its name from a corruption of Gebal Tari. Nevertheless, some authors hold a different opinion. Thus, Montero traces the origin of the name to two Arabic words, Gebal al or Ali, which signifies a lofty mountain. The detailed accounts of the invasion in the Arabian Chronicles are very various and contradictory, though there is a similarity in the description of the main and most important features. The following is an account selected from Gasangos. Gasangos' translation of an Arabic chronicle. Musa sent for his freedman Tariq ibn Zayyad and gave him the command of 12,000 men, Arabs and Berbers. He then commanded him to cross the straits and invade Andalus, bidding Ilian also accompany the expedition with his own troops. Before Tariq left Africa, a great number of volunteers flocked under his banners. He first went to Ceuta, and having embarked in vessels, he cast anchor close to a mountain which received his name and was ever since called Gebal Tariq, the mountain of Tariq. This event took place in the year 93 of the Hegira. When Tariq was about to land, he found some of the rum. The original signification of this word is Romans, but it was used generally by the Arabs when speaking of the inhabitants of Spain. When Tariq was about to land, he found some of the rum posted on a commodious part of the coast where he had intended to disembark, who made some show of resistance, but Tariq, giving up that spot, sailed off from it at night and went towards another part of the coast, which he contrived to render flat by means of the oars and by rowing over them the saddles of the horses, and in this way he managed to effect a landing unobserved by the enemy and before they were aware of it. Tariq had no sooner landed his army in safety than he advanced towards the interior, pillaging and ravaging as he went along. Theodomir, a chief of the Goths, was at this time in the neighborhood of Gebal Tariq with a tolerable force, and he speedily became engaged in a series of encounters with the Moors, but with no success. Tariq continued to advance, having, it is related, burnt his ships in order to invest his men with the courage of desperation. Tariq continued to advance, having, it is related, burnt his ships in order to invest his men with the courage of desperation.